I gave my life to this country 30 years in the Royal Canadian Navy, facing death in the Gulf, my bones aching from storms, my dreams buried to raise my daughter alone. I sold my medals, my blood-earned pride, to buy her a mansion in Kingston's elite streets. And what did she do? She stabbed me with a whisper sharper than shrapnel. "Don't tell the neighbors you're my dad. Pretend you're a nobody from Halifax." My heart didn't just break, it was obliterated, crushed under her designer heels, my sacrifice spat on to shield her shallow social mask. The rage boils in my veins, the betrayal cuts deeper than any wound I took in battle. I'm nothing but a ghost in her perfect world. But then the neighbor and Admiral saw me, his salute unmasking her lie. Stay with me, this tale of treachery and truth will sear your soul. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from, whether it's somewhere beautiful in Canada or anywhere else in this amazing world. 3 days I drove, 1,200 kilometers from Halifax to Kingston, my old Ford pickup rattling like a frigate in a squall. Every kilometer was for her, Emily, my daughter. The girl I raised alone after her mother's death tore our world apart. I was a Royal Canadian Navy man, 30 years dodging torpedoes in the Gulf, my hands callous from saluting the flag and cradling her through nightmares. I sold my medals, my pride from battles fought for this country, to give her the down payment for a mansion in Kingston's ritzy Cataraqui Woods. My pension, my sweat, my everything poured into her dream. I pictured a warm reunion, her arms around me, maybe Liam, my grandson, giggling at his grandpa's sea stories. Instead, her words gutted me. "Pretend I'm nobody." The Kingston dusk settled over manicured lawns and gleaming SUVs, a world that screamed wealth. My truck stuck out like a rusted anchor among their polished hulls. "Just play along, okay?" Emily hissed, her eyes darting to a neighbor's window. "They don't need to know." Know what? That her father was a sailor who gave his all? The betrayal burned hotter than any firefight. My chest tightened as I gripped my duffel, the weight of her shame heavier than any anchor I'd ever hauled. But something in the Admiral's glance told me this wasn't over. Emily's heels clicked like Morse code on the pristine driveway, each step hammering her betrayal deeper into my chest. I followed her into the house, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, its worn canvas a relic from my Navy days, as out of place in her polished world as I was. The air inside hit me like a sterile wave, cool, scented with lavender diffusers, not a trace of the home-cooked poutine or maple-glazed salmon I'd taught her to make as a kid. This was Cataraqui Woods, Kingston's elite enclave, where SUVs gleamed in every driveway and mini golf greens replaced backyards. My old pickup, parked out front, looked like a shipwreck among their luxury fleets. Emily's house screamed wealth, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, furniture that cost more than my yearly pension. "Charles is upstairs finishing a call," she said, her voice tight, eyes scanning me like I was a smudge on her perfect tableau. "Let's get you settled." "Oh?" She led me through rooms that could have been ripped from a Toronto design magazine. Every surface gleamed, every angle sharp, every detail screaming money. My work boots thudded too loudly on the hardwood, announcing my intrusion with every step. The walls were a gallery of exclusion-framed photos of Charles's family skiing in Banff, Emily and Charles posing in Niagara on the lake, their kids at private school galas in Ottawa. Not one picture of me. Not one hint of the man who'd sold his Gulf War medals to make this life possible. "Nice memories," I said, my voice flat as the Kingston waterfront at dawn. Emily's step faltered. "Oh, that's from our Montreal trip last summer," she replied too quickly, steering me away from the mantel. Her eyes darted to the window, where a neighbor trimmed hedges with surgical precision. In the kitchen, I spotted a familiar silver tray, a gift I'd given Emily for her wedding, engraved with our family crest. She slid it into a cabinet before I could touch it. "We're minimalist now," she muttered, avoiding my gaze. Minimalist? Or just ashamed of the sailor who raised her? My throat tightened, the sting of her rejection sharper than any Atlantic gale. "Charles will be down soon," she said. Her tone clipped, like she was briefing a subordinate. "Just keep things light, okay?" Light. As if 30 years of service, of double shifts at the Halifax docks after my discharge, of pouring every cent into her education, could be reduced to small talk about Ontario weather. Charles descended the staircase, phone glued to his ear, his tailored suit screaming Bay Street lawyer. He gave me a nod, the kind you'd toss to a delivery guy, and held up a finger. "Wait, important business." When he finally hung up, his handshake was firm, calculated, like he was sizing me up for a deposition. "Good to have you, Bill," he said, his smile as polished as the marble island between us. "Emily's told me so much, yet not enough to call me her father." "Hell of a place you've got," I said, running a calloused hand along the counter. "Solid build." Something flickered in Charles's eyes. Maybe he knew I'd paid for the foundation under his feet. "Emily's got an eye for design," he deflected, smooth as a politician at a Kingston town hall. The doorbell chimed, and Emily tensed like a sailor spotting a storm on the horizon. "That's James Harper," she whispered, urgency lacing her voice. "The neighbor. He's important." "Important?" The man who stepped through the door was no ordinary neighbor. Admiral James Harper, Royal Canadian Navy, retired, his presence commanding as a warship in full sail. His eyes locked onto mine, a spark of recognition flashing like a signal flare. "Mackenzie, isn't it?" he said, his voice low, steady. "Gulf War, HMCS, Athabascan." I never forget a face. My chest swelled with a flicker of pride, the first since I'd arrived. But Emily cut in, her laugh brittle as ice on the St. Lawrence. "Oh, just an old friend from Halifax," she said, positioning herself between us, her hand grazing my arm like a warning shot. Harper's brow furrowed, but he didn't press. Not yet. As he left, Emily's relief was palpable, her shoulders slumping like a crew after a long watch. She guided me to the guest room, a sterile suite with white linens and generic art, no trace of family. "Dinner's at 7, she said, already retreating. "Make yourself at home." Home? This wasn't a home, it was a stage, and I was a prop to be hidden backstage. My duffel hit the floor, the thud echoing my sinking heart. I stood at the window, watching Harper's silhouette across the street, his gaze lingering on my truck. He knew something, and in that moment, so did I. This betrayal wasn't just Emily's shame. It was a lie built on my sacrifice, and the truth was clawing its way to the surface. The guest room door clicked shut, sealing me in a tomb of white linens and sterile silence. My duffel bag slumped against the wall, its frayed canvas a bitter reminder of the 30 years I'd given to the Royal Canadian Navy, and the decades after, hauling cargo at Halifax docks to raise Emily alone. I'd come 1,200 kilometers to Kingston, expecting a homecoming, but instead, I was a ghost in my daughter's mansion, erased from her perfect Cataraqui Woods life. The pain of her whisper, "Don't tell the neighbors you're my dad," gnawed at me, sharper than any shrapnel I'd faced in the Gulf. But it was about to cut deeper. I wandered to the garage, seeking air, seeking something real in this house of polished lies. The overhead bulb flickered, casting harsh light on Emily's obsessive organization. Christmas lights coiled like naval ropes, lawn tools aligned like soldiers on parade. Tucked behind a stack of labeled bins, I found a cardboard box, its edges soft with age, marked Old stuff in Emily's careful script. My hands trembled as I pulled it free, dust swirling like ghosts of battles past. Inside, I found a letter, yellowed and creased, written in a child's unsteady hand. "Dear Dad," it began, "you're my hero. I'll always be proud of you, my Navy man. Love, Emily, age 10. My throat closed, the words a dagger to my heart. She'd written this after her mother's funeral, when I'd held her through endless nights, promising we'd survive. She'd kept it, but buried it here, like a secret too shameful for her gleaming world. I sank to the cold concrete, clutching the letter, my chest heaving with a pain that felt like drowning. But the worst was yet to come. Voices drifted from the kitchen, sharp and careless, slicing through the garage door's thin crack. "He doesn't fit here, Charles," Emily said, her voice low but venomous. "His truck, his clothes, his hands. People will talk. He's a liability to our reputation." A liability? I'd sold my Gulf War medals, my pride forged in fire, to buy this house. I'd worked double shifts until my back screamed, all for her dreams. And now, I was a stain on her social canvas. Charles's voice, smooth as a Bay Street lawyer, agreed. "Just keep him out of sight at the BBQ tomorrow. Say he's sick. The neighbors don't need to know he's your father." My blood roared, louder than any warship's engine. My own daughter, ashamed of the man who'd built her life, had reduced me to a problem to be managed. I gripped the letter so hard it nearly tore, my calloused fingers tracing her childish scrawl. The garage walls closed in, the air thick with betrayal. I'd faced enemy fire, stared down storms in the Atlantic, but nothing had ever wounded me like this. Emily's shame wasn't just a rejection, it was an annihilation of everything I was. My service, my sacrifice, my love, all cast aside to protect her status among Kingston's elite. I wanted to storm into the kitchen, to shout that I'd given everything, my youth, my dreams, my pride for her. But my legs wouldn't move. I was anchored to that spot. A sailor lost in a sea of grief, the letter my only lifeline to a daughter who no longer existed. Outside, the neighbor's lawnmower hummed, a mocking reminder of the perfect world Emily craved. I shoved the letter into my pocket, next to my wallet, where I kept the property contract proof of my stake in this house she'd claimed as hers. The pain was a living thing now, clawing at my chest, but a flicker of something else stirred. James Harper's recognition, his salute, had reminded me who I was. Emily could hide me, but she couldn't erase me. Not yet. The truth was rising, and I'd make sure it broke through her polished facade like a torpedo through a hull. The garage's cold concrete anchored me as I sat, Emily's childhood letter trembling in my hands, its words, "You're my hero," mocking the man I'd become in her eyes. A liability, a secret to be buried. The pain of her betrayal, calling me a social burden, burned hotter than any firefight I'd faced in the Gulf. But something shifted in that dim Kingston garage, 1,200 kilometers from my Halifax home. My fingers, calloused from 30 years in the Royal Canadian Navy, brushed against the worn leather of my wallet, heavy with more than memories. Inside, folded tight, was the property contract for this Cataraqui Woods mansion, a document I'd signed 3 years ago, my pension and sold medals funding 80% of its foundation. I hadn't thought to check it until now, but the weight of Emily's shame drove me to it. I unfolded the paper under my phone's flashlight, the beam cutting through the dark like a ship's spotlight. "Primary owner, William Mackenzie," it read, my signature bold as a naval ensign. Investment, $250,000. Ownership, 80%. Emily's name was there in smaller print, her contribution a hollow zero. My breath caught, a storm raging in my chest. I'd built this house, not just with money, but with my life's blood, and she dared to erase me. I pulled out my phone, hand steady as if gripping a helm in a squall, and snapped photos of each page: contract, bank records, receipts from the sale of my naval memorabilia. Every click was a reclaiming of my truth, a defiance against Emily's polished lies. The documents told a story her pristine walls wouldn't. I was the keel holding this mansion steady, the foundation she'd buried under her social charade. But another truth was waiting, one I hadn't expected. At the neighborhood BBQ, where Emily had insisted I stay hidden, James Harper's voice cut through the chatter of Kingston's elite. I'd slipped out to the backyard, unable to stay caged in her guest room, my flannel shirt a stark contrast to their tailored golf polos. Harper's eyes found mine across the manicured lawn, his salute sharp as a parade ground command. "Mackenzie, HMCS Athabascan, Gulf War," he said, loud enough for heads to turn. "I heard your daughter speak at a Navy gala in Ottawa 2 years back. She was proud as hell of her old man, then told everyone how you raised her single-handedly after her mom passed." My heart lurched, torn between pride and rage. Proud? Then why was I a secret now, skulking in her garage like a stowaway? Harper's words were a lifeline, pulling me from the abyss of Emily's betrayal. She'd once honored me, but now, in this world of SUVs and private school fundraisers, she'd traded my legacy for status. I stepped back into the shadows, my mind racing. I needed to know my rights, to anchor this sinking ship of a family. Back in the guest room, I dialed Margaret O'Connell, my old lawyer from Halifax, who'd handled the house purchase when Emily was still grateful for her dad's help. "Bill, good to hear you." Margaret's voice crackled through the phone, steady as a lighthouse. "You're calling about the Kingston property, aren't you?" I spread the contract across the sterile white bedspread, its pages glowing under the afternoon light streaming through the window. "I own 80%, Margaret." "What does that mean?" Her answer was clear as a foghorn. "You're the primary stakeholder. Without your signature, they can't refinance, sell, or change a damn thing. You hold the helm, Bill." My grip tightened on the phone, a spark of power igniting through the grief. I wasn't just a forgotten sailor, I was the man who'd built their world, and they'd underestimated me. The photos on my phone, 37-inch total, were my arsenal now. Proof of every dollar I'd poured into this house, every sacrifice I'd made. The garage's dust still clung to my fingers. Emily's letter a weight in my pocket. Harper's recognition and Margaret's confirmation were signal flares in the dark, reminding me who I was. Not a nobody from Halifax, but a veteran who'd fought for his country and his daughter. The truth was rising, unstoppable as a tide, and I'd make sure Emily faced it, no matter how it shattered her perfect Cataraqui Woods facade. The dining room in Emily's Cataraqui Woods mansion glowed under a chandelier that cost more than my Halifax pension could dream of, its light casting sharp shadows across crystal wine glasses and china plates arranged like a naval formation. I sat at the table's far end, isolated from the family cluster: Emily, Charles, their 2 teenagers, and little Liam in his high chair. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I was a stranger in the home I'd built, my 80% ownership buried under their polished lies. My phone, heavy with photos of the property contract, burned in my pocket next to Emily's childhood letter calling me her hero. The rage that had simmered since her whisper, "Don't tell the neighbors you're my dad," now roared like a warship's engine. Tonight, I'd stopped playing her game. Charles carved a prime rib roast with the precision of a Bay Street lawyer, his tailored shirt screaming success. Emily played the perfect hostess, her smile as artificial as the lavender scent in the air. The teenagers scrolled their phones, earbuds half hidden, ignoring the dinner table rules. Only Liam, my 2-year-old grandson, offered a spark of warmth, his chubby fingers reaching for me with an unguarded grin. "Grandpa," he babbled, and Emily flinched, her fork clattering against her plate. Charles shot her a look, and she quickly redirected. "Oh, Liam, you mean Uncle Bill from Halifax," she said, her voice tight as a mooring line. "Uncle Bill?" The lie snapped something inside me, the pain of her betrayal sharper than any Gulf War shrapnel. I leaned forward, my calloused hands gripping the table's edge. "Enough," I said, my voice low but steady, like a captain addressing a mutinous crew. "I'm done pretending." Emily's eyes widened, her perfect facade cracking. Charles paused mid-cut, his knife hovering. I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened the folder of contract photos, and held up the screen, my signature blazing in black ink. "This house is mine, Emily, 80% mine, paid for with my pension, my medals, my life. You live here because I made it possible." The words landed like depth charges, the room exploding into silence. Emily's face drained of color, her lips trembling as if the Kingston winter had seeped into her bones. Charles's jaw tightened, his lawyer's instincts kicking in. "What is this bill?" he demanded, his voice sharp as a legal brief. "Some kind of stunt?" I swiped to the next photo bank records showing my $250,000 down payment, the sale of my Gulf War memorabilia. "No stunt, Charles. Truth. I own this house, and you've both treated me like a deckhand to be swept under the rug." Emily's hand flew to her mouth, a sob escaping. "Dad, it was temporary," she stammered, her voice climbing an octave. "You can't. This is our home." "It's my home," I corrected, my tone cold as the Atlantic in January. "You made me a nobody to your neighbors, Emily. You hid my tray, my photos, my pride, all to protect your status in this fake little world." Charles grabbed his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. "I'm calling my lawyer. This is coercion, maybe fraud." I stood, my shadow falling across the table like a battleship silhouette. "Call whoever you want. Margaret O'Connell already confirmed it. Without my signature, you can't touch this house, not a refinance, not a sale, nothing." The teenagers froze, sensing the storm. Liam gurgled, oblivious, his tiny hand still reaching for me. Emily's eyes brimmed with tears, her perfect hostess mask shattered. "Dad, please," she whispered, her voice breaking like ice on the St. Lawrence. "The kids' schools, our friends, our life, you can't take this from us." I looked at her, really looked, past the designer dress and manicured nails to the girl I'd raised, the one who'd once saluted me in her backyard sailor hat. "I'm not taking anything," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "I'm claiming what's mine, my place in this family, my truth." Charles's calls went to voicemail, his confidence crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. The dining room was a battlefield now, and I stood firm, a veteran who'd fought too long to be erased. But the war wasn't over. Admiral Harper's salute lingered in my mind, a signal that the neighbors would soon know the truth I'd been forced to hide. The Kingston dusk hung heavy over Cataraqui Woods, the manicured lawns glowing under string lights as Admiral James Harper's backyard buzzed with the neighborhood's elite. The air smelled of grilled steaks and expensive wine, a far cry from the Halifax docks where I'd toiled to fund Emily's dream. After the dining room showdown, where I'd laid bare my 80% ownership of her mansion, Emily's world teetered like a frigate in a storm. But the real tempest was coming. Harper had invited us to this BBQ, his annual Remembrance Day tribute for local veterans, and Emily's nervous chatter about keeping things low-key only fueled my resolve. I wasn't her friend from Halifax anymore. Tonight, The truth would break through her polished lies like a torpedo through a hull. Harper stood at the center of the lawn, his navy dress whites crisp as a parade ground flag, his voice booming like a cannon over the crowd. "Tonight, we honor sacrifice," he began, raising a glass. "And I'm proud to salute a man among us, a Gulf War hero, William Mackenzie, who served on HMCS Athabascan and gave everything for his daughter's future." The crowd turned, their eyes locking onto me, my flannel shirt a stark contrast to their tailored blazers. Emily froze beside me, her wine glass trembling, her face pale as the November frost. "No," she whispered, her voice a desperate plea. "Dad, please don't." But Harper pressed on, his words relentless as a naval barrage. "Bill funded this very neighborhood his daughter's home stands because of his pension, his medals, his blood. Yet some here don't know the hero in their midst." Gasps rippled through the crowd, their polished facades cracking under the weight of truth. Emily's knees buckled, her designer dress crumpling as she gripped Charles's arm. The neighbors, doctors, lawyers, private school parents stared, their whispers slicing through her like shrapnel. "She hit her own father?" one murmured. "A veteran? For shame." Charles, his lawyer's composure shattered, fumbled with his phone, muttering about defamation. But Harper's salute held the crowd captive, his eyes burning into Emily's. "You spoke of him at the Ottawa Gala, Emily," he said, his tone sharp as a cutlass. "You called him your rock. Why hide him now?" The question hung like smoke over a battlefield, and Emily's sob broke the silence, raw and jagged. "I didn't mean to," she choked, tears streaming down her face. They judge here, Dad. Your truck, your hands, they don't fit." Her confession was a wound laid bare, her perfect world collapsing under the neighbor's gaze. I stepped forward, my voice steady as a warship's keel. "You judged me, Emily, not them. You took my sacrifice $250,000, my Gulf War pride, and buried it to play princess in Cataraqui Woods." The crowd parted, their stares pinning her like searchlights. Charles tried to intervene, his voice rising. "This is private, Bill. You're humiliating her." "Humiliating?" I roared, my rage breaking free like a chained anchor. "You called me a liability, hid my tray, erased my name from your walls. I'm the foundation of this house, and you made me a ghost." Emily sank to the grass, her sobs echoing across the lawn, her social fortress in ruins. Harper placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm as a comrade's in battle. "You're no ghost, Mackenzie," he said. "You're a hero, and Kingston knows it now." The neighbors' whispers grew louder, their respect shifting to me, the crew bin they'd overlooked. Emily looked up, her mascara-streaked face that of the girl I'd raised, lost in a sea of her own making. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the crowd. I shook my head, my heart torn between pain and resolve. "Sorry doesn't rebuild what you broke, Emily. Truth does." The lawn fell silent, the weight of my words settling like fog over the St. Lawrence. Charles stood frozen, his phone useless, his power stripped by the truth I'd unleashed. Harper's salute lingered in the air, a signal that my fight wasn't over, but it was no longer just mine. The neighborhood knew who I was, and Emily's lies couldn't hide me anymore. The backyard of Admiral James Harper's Kingston home fell silent, the string lights casting a dim glow over the stunned faces of Cataraqui Woods' elite. Emily knelt on the grass, her designer dress stained with tears and earth, her perfect world shattered by Harper's public salute to me, a Gulf War veteran, the man who'd funded her mansion with my $250, 000 sacrifice. Her sob echoed across the lawn, a raw, broken sound that cut deeper than her earlier betrayal. "Don't tell the neighbors you're my dad." Charles stood frozen, his phone dangling uselessly, his Bay Street lawyer's confidence drowned in the tide of truth. The neighbors' whispers, once Emily's currency of status, now judged her, their eyes shifting from her crumpled form to me, the weathered sailor in flannel who'd built her life. My rage, burning since that first whispered lie, simmered in my chest, but something else stirred a flicker of the love I'd carried for Emily through 30 years of storms, from Halifax to the Gulf. I turned away from the crowd, my boots heavy on the manicured lawn, and walked back to Emily's house. My house. 80% mine by contract, paid for with my pension and pride. The air inside was still sterile, scented with lavender, not the maple syrup warmth of our old Halifax kitchen. I sat in the guest room, the sterile white linens mocking my isolation, and pulled out my phone. The contract photos glowed, proof of my stake, but Emily's childhood letter, "You're my hero," weighed heavier in my pocket. I'd come to Kingston expecting a family reunion, not a war, but her shame had turned me into a ghost. Yet Harper's words at the BBQ, his salute, and the neighbors' stares had shifted the tide. I wasn't done fighting, not for revenge, but for truth, for the daughter I'd raised, for the grandson who'd called me Grandpa. I dialed Margaret O'Connell, my Halifax lawyer, her voice a steady anchor through the static. "Bill, you're ready to decide?" she asked, her tone calm as a lighthouse beam. "I am," I said, my voice firm despite the ache. "Set up an educational trust for Liam, my grandson. The house, my 80% goes to him when he's 25, provided he graduates university. Let him learn what sacrifice means, what his grandfather built." Margaret paused, her pen scratching in the background. "That's generous, Bill. Most would reclaim the property outright." I shook my head, though she couldn't see. "It's not about taking, Margaret. It's about giving Liam a foundation truth, not lies. The trust would let Emily and Charles stay, but the house would belong to a boy who'd know his grandfather's story, not the polished fiction Emily had spun." The next morning, Emily stood in the kitchen, her eyes red, her designer polish gone. Liam played nearby, stacking blocks shaped like ships, his giggle a small light in the storm. "Dad," Emily whispered, her voice fragile as ice on the St. Lawrence. "I'm so sorry. I was scared of their judgment, of losing this life. I didn't mean to erase you." Her words trembled, but I held up a hand, my heart torn between anger and the memory of her at 10, saluting me in her backyard sailor hat. "You didn't just erase me, Emily," I said, my voice low but steady. "You erased the man who sold his medals, who worked until his hands bled to give you this." She flinched, tears spilling, but nodded. "I know, Dad. I love you. I always have." Her confession was a lifeline, fragile but real. I looked at Liam, his tiny hands clutching a toy anchor. "The house goes to him," I said, "a trust, for when he's 25, he'll know his grandfather's story, no secrets, no shame." Emily's sob caught in her throat, gratitude mixing with guilt. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "Can we start again?" I nodded, my chest loosening for the first time since I'd arrived. "We're going to Halifax next month. I'll show Liam where his mom learned to be strong." Emily smiled, a real smile, not the hostess mask. The war was over, not won with anger, but with love, the kind that builds foundations stronger than any Kingston mansion. The Kingston dawn broke over Cataraqui Woods, painting the St. Lawrence River golden, its light filtering through my Halifax porch as I sat, coffee in hand, months after the storm that had shaken my family. Emily's betrayal, "Don't tell the neighbors you're my dad," had cut deeper than any Gulf War wound, but the trust I'd set for Liam, my grandson, had anchored us to a new beginning. Back in Halifax, my phone buzzed with Emily's messages, her voice softer now, free of the polished mask she'd worn in Kingston. "Liam said anchor today, Dad," she texted, a photo attached of him clutching a toy ship, his eyes bright as the Atlantic. "He's asking for Grandpa." My heart swelled, the pain of her shame easing like a tide retreating. At a Remembrance Day event in Kingston, Emily had stood before the crowd, her voice steady, and introduced me as her father, the Royal Canadian Navy veteran who'd given her everything. The applause echoed, a salute louder than Admiral James Harper's, and for the first time I felt seen not as a ghost, but as the foundation of our family. Liam's tiny voice, calling Grandpa an anchor, was proof that legacies endure, not in mansions or medals, but in truth passed down through love. Emily was learning to honor her roots, planning a Christmas trip to Halifax to show Liam the docks where I'd taught her to fish, the sea that shaped me. Honor isn't in wealth or status, it's in the courage to stand by those who built you, no matter how callous their hands. If this story stirred your heart, share it with someone you love. Like this video, leave a comment with your own story of family or sacrifice, and subscribe to Maple Revenge for more tales of truth and redemption.